presidential hopeful Vivek Ramaswamy is expected to address a crowd in Nashville, Tennessee, urging the release of the manifesto connected to a deadly school shooting that happened earlier this year. Metro Nashville police say back on March 27th, Audrey Hale, a transgender woman and former student, shot into the Covenant Christian Elementary School, killing 3 students and 3 staff members. Hale was eventually fatally shot by police inside the school. Now, investigators say Hale had drawn a detailed map of the school, including potential entry points, and conducted surveillance of the building before carrying out that attack. A manifesto belonging to Hale has been a topic of conversation since the shooting, as some have called for its release, and police have said they will not be releasing it until the investigation wraps up. That investigation, they say, could take years, or possibly just 1 year. Now, I want to talk more about this as we wait for that to get underway. Deborah Fisher is the executive director of the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government, and she does join us live now to discuss this further. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having me.
So first off, I just kind of want to get your opinion here on whether or not this should actually be released, because that is a big question that we've seen asked time and time again over the last 3 months or so.
Right. And really, there's a public debate going on as well as a legal debate going on. And the public debate is basically, do the writings that Audrey Hale wrote and left in her car in her home, do they have value in helping us stop future school shootings? And secondarily, should police be allowed to withhold criminal evidence in a crime, especially a crime that was as big and as public as this? And then on the other side, the parents are arguing that releasing the writings would simply just be too painful for their children and also the other survivors of the adults who were killed, and that's not worth releasing them, and that they claim they could also inspire copycat killers.
Now, some of the parents, as you mentioned, have said, especially of the victims, that they do not want the manifesto to be released. Should that factor in, just based on your experience in, the situation here and open records in general?
Right. Well, in Tennessee, once investigation and a criminal prosecution is over, the records in a law enforcement investigative file, most of the records, are subject to the public records law and open for inspection. And in this case, the parents of the victims and also the school and the church are arguing that as victims, that they have a right to basically veto the release of those records. So that would be very unusual in Tennessee, and just as a matter of course would cause some problems going down the line if victims could veto the release of evidence in a crime.
And at this point, as we mentioned, it kind of all remains up in the air, because we know that Metro Police have said they are not planning to release this until the investigation is over. Is there anything, in your opinion, for the public to gain from this manifesto being released?
Yeah, I think so. And just to be clear, the police called the writings a manifesto, but there are multiple writings. There are things that were left in her home in journals. There were things in her car. There may have been things that she emailed to other people or other types of communications. So is there a public interest in those? I think so. In 2021, the U.S. Secret Service and Department of Homeland Security released a report that I think is worth mentioning that looked at school attack plots that were averted. They looked at 67 averted school attack plots. And the conclusion was that an aware community that can identify warning signs, what behaviors, what people said, what people were thinking, and intervene is the best way to stop attacks. And that's what happened in all of those averted attacks. Members of the community, maybe they were close, friends, family, but also other members of the community, noticed something, heard something, and they came forward and stopped them. So with that in mind, I think that the public does need to be aware of what were the things that she was saying and thinking. What should we be aware of? I mean, we all have a stake in this. None of us want additional school shootings. So we need to know, you know, what we should be aware of. In addition to that, lawmakers have called on the release of the shootings because they want to develop additional legislation related to public safety. And they're also interested in the motives and kind of what inspired the attack.
And so the Metro Nashville Police Department, as we said, does argue that the manifesto, other documents are part of their ongoing investigation. But as we know, Audrey Hale is dead. Should that and does that change anything when you're talking about a quote unquote active investigation?
Right, and that is one of the legal issues in the case. Our law in Tennessee says that if there is an ongoing criminal investigation and contemplated charges, that records can be withheld until after the case is over, until it's been through the court system. But in this case, police said that they believe that she acted alone. So the legal argument is that if you're not planning to charge anyone else in the case, then you can't just keep the investigation open or keep records withheld. And so far, police have said to that in court that they have not ruled out charging anyone else, although they haven't said that they have any leads or that they think there might be another person. In fact, they've said the opposite. They said they don't think there was anyone else involved.
Who actually has possession or owns this manifesto right now? Does it belong to anyone? Because I know that the parents of Audrey Hale have said that they've given it over to the parents of the victims, the family members there. Does anyone actually have ownership over the manifesto?
Yeah, and that was something that came out in court, and it was sort of an interesting move. I think it maybe is a legal maneuver, but in terms of evidence in a crime, if you think about it, law enforcement collects evidence that's often owned by someone else, whether it is, you know, text messages, emails, communications, or actual things that were used in the commission of a crime. And those stay with police. And in this case, even if the writings or journals were eventually given back to the parents or anyone else, they still would keep copies of the information as part of the investigation. So this ownership thing is just sort of this interesting twist, but I don't see how that impacts access to evidence in a crime.
What are the implications when you're talking about, let's say, them being released or not released? What are the implications for the future and future cases?
Right, and that's really where we're concerned, that there is not new law created by the courts that says victims have a right to basically veto the release of certain crime evidence. We think that would be problematic for a number of different issues. And that we don't think it's a law as it is now in Tennessee. And so that's really one of the legal issues that is at play that go well beyond this particular crime.
All right. Deborah, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.